The chandeliers of the National Literary Awards ceremony cast golden light across a sea of tuxedos and evening gowns. At the podium stands Gavin Ashford, 34 years old, with his carefully styled hair and designer glasses that have no prescription. He holds the crystal trophy in one hand and his best-selling novel, The Lighthouse Secret, in the other. The crowd of publishers, critics, and celebrities leans forward in anticipation. This is the moment everyone has been waiting for. The acclaimed author is about to read the final passage of his masterpiece live on national television. Gavin's voice drips with theatrical confidence as he opens the book to the last page. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the ending that has moved millions to tears. He begins to read, his voice echoing through the grand ballroom. And so, the lighthouse keeper finally understood the truth. The light he had been protecting all these years was nothing compared to the light of honesty. His smile is radiant. The cameras zoom in, but then his eyes catch the next line, and his face freezes. He continues reading, his voice now shaking. But this story is not about a lighthouse keeper. This story is about an imposter standing on a stage, holding a trophy that does not belong to him, reading words he did not write, unaware that his wife switched the manuscript at the printer. The blood drains from Gavin's face. Sweat beads on his forehead. He tries to close the book, but his hands are trembling. The audience sits in confused silence. From the front row, a woman stands up. She has been invisible to most people tonight, wearing a simple black dress, her dark hair pulled back, but her eyes are blazing with 10 years of suppressed fire. Her name is Alara Ashford, and she is the real author. If you want to see how this wife destroyed her narcissistic husband's entire career with just one rewritten chapter, subscribe now and hit the bell icon, because this revenge story gets even better. Let's go back to where it all started. 10 years earlier, Alara was 29 years old and already dying inside her own marriage. Every morning began the same way. She would wake up at 5 a.m. in the attic that Gavin had converted into her writing space. The room was cold in winter, suffocating in summer, with one small window that barely let in light. But it had a desk, and that was all she needed. Alara would write for 14 hours straight, her fingers stained with ink from the fountain pen she refused to abandon. She was creating something extraordinary. A novel about betrayal, redemption, and the price of truth. Every sentence was crafted with precision. Every character breathed with life she poured from her own soul. Meanwhile, downstairs, Gavin would sleep until noon. When he finally woke up, he would stumble into the kitchen, check his phone for messages from women he met at parties, and then yell up the stairs, "Alara, I need breakfast, and make it quick. I have a lunch meeting with important people." Important people. That was Gavin's favorite phrase. He used it to describe anyone who might advance his non-existent career as a creative visionary. In reality, Gavin had never finished a single piece of writing in his life. He had started 17 novels, abandoned all of them by page 30, but he had something Alara did not have: confidence, charm, the ability to walk into a room and make people believe he was a genius without ever proving it. One night, after Alara had been writing for 16 hours straight, she came downstairs with pages of her manuscript. Her eyes were red from exhaustion, but they shined with hope. "Gavin, I finished chapter 12. Do you want to read it?" Gavin was on the couch, drinking expensive whiskey and watching reality television. He barely looked at her. Sure, leave it on the table. I'll get to it." He never did. 3 months passed. Alara finished chapter after chapter. The novel was becoming her masterpiece. She could feel it. This was the book that would change her life. One evening, she gathered her courage and said the words she had been rehearsing for weeks. "Gavin, I think the book is almost ready. I want to start looking for a literary agent. Maybe we could—" He cut her off with a laugh. Not a kind laugh, a laugh that made her feel small. "An agent? Alara, sweetheart, let me explain something to you." He stood up and walked toward her, his breath heavy with alcohol. "Nobody is going to buy a book written by a shy, awkward woman who looks like a librarian. The publishing industry is about image. It's about presence. It's about someone who can go on talk shows and sell the dream." He pointed at himself. "Someone like me." Alara felt her heart crack, but she tried to stay calm. "But it's my story, Gavin. I wrote every word, and I'm grateful for that, darling. Really, I am. His voice turned soft, manipulative. But think about it practically. You hate public speaking. You have anxiety attacks in crowds. You want this beautiful story to reach millions of people, right? Then it needs my face on the cover, my name, my voice. He put his hands on her shoulders, his grip just a little too tight. We're a team, Alara. You write, I shine. That's how marriages work. That's how we'll finally make something of ourselves. Alara wanted to argue. She wanted to scream, but she had been conditioned for so long to believe she was not enough. So she nodded. Okay, Gavin, we'll do it your way. His smile returned immediately. That's my girl. Now, how about you make me some dinner? All this creative direction is exhausting. The months that followed were a nightmare disguised as a dream coming true. Alara finished the novel, all 473 pages. It was called The Lighthouse Secret, a story about a woman who discovers her husband has been living a double life and must decide whether to expose him or protect the illusion of their perfect marriage. The irony was not lost on Alara. Gavin immediately took control. He contacted Sienna Rothwell, a ruthless literary agent known for turning unknown authors into bestsellers. Sienna was 28, beautiful in a sharp and calculated way, with blonde hair always pulled into a tight bun and eyes that evaluated everything like a business transaction. Sienna came to their house for the first meeting. Gavin had rehearsed his pitch for days, memorizing the plot points Alara had written in her notes. The story is about identity, power, and the lies we tell ourselves, Gavin said smoothly, sitting in the expensive leather chair he had bought specifically for this meeting. Sienna listened, intrigued. Then she asked, "Did you outline this yourself?" "Every beat," Gavin lied without hesitation. Alara sat in the corner of the room, invisible. Sienna's eyes had passed over her once, dismissed her as irrelevant, and never looked at her again. After 2 hours of discussion, Sienna stood up and shook Gavin's hand. "I can sell this, but I need you to understand something, Gavin. The author is the brand. You need to be ready for interviews, book tours, social media. Can you handle that?" Gavin's smile was dazzling. "I was born ready." Sienna glanced briefly at Alara. "And your wife? She's supportive of your career." "Oh, absolutely," Gavin said. "Alara is my biggest fan. Aren't you, darling?" Alara forced a smile. "Yes, I just want the book to succeed." Sienna's expression was unreadable. "Good, because in this industry, distractions can be fatal. Gavin, I'll be in touch." After Sienna left, Gavin was euphoric. He opened a bottle of champagne, celebrated alone while Alara cleaned the kitchen. But late that night, Alara heard something that changed everything. She had gone to bed early, exhausted from rewriting the third act, but she woke up to the sound of voices downstairs. Gavin's voice, and Sienna's voice. Alara crept to the top of the stairs and listened. "She's becoming a problem," Sienna said coldly. "I saw the way she looked at me. She thinks she deserves credit." Gavin laughed. "Alara? She's harmless. She'll do whatever I say." "Are you sure?" "Because if she tries to claim authorship after we go public, it could destroy the entire deal. Publishers hate controversy." There was a pause. Then Gavin said something that made Alara's blood turn to ice. "Don't worry about Alara. Once the money starts coming in, I'll have her committed. There's a private psychiatric facility upstate. My lawyer says if I document her erratic behavior for a few months, I can get her institutionalized for her own safety. Then she'll be out of the picture permanently." Sienna's voice was pleased. "Smart. And cruel. I like it." They both laughed. Alara covered her mouth to keep from making a sound. Her whole body shook. Tears streamed down her face. But beneath the tears, something else was growing. Rage, pure, cold, calculated rage. She went back to her attic room, locked the door, and sat at her desk. Her hands were still shaking, but her mind was suddenly, perfectly clear. Gavin thought he had won. He thought she was weak. He thought she would just disappear quietly into madness while he stole her life's work. He was wrong. Alara opened her laptop and stared at the final chapter of The Lighthouse Secret, the chapter Gavin had never bothered to read, the chapter that was supposed to go to the printer next week. And then, with a smile that would have terrified anyone who saw it, Alara began to type. She was going to rewrite the ending. Not the ending of the novel, the ending of Gavin's entire life. The next morning, Alara came downstairs with a smile on her face, a soft, defeated smile that Gavin had seen 1,000 times before, the smile of a woman who had accepted her place. "Good morning, Gavin," she said quietly, pouring him coffee. Gavin barely looked up from his phone. "Morning. Did you finish those revisions Sienna wanted?" "Yes. Everything is ready." "Good." "The printer needs the final files by Friday. Make sure there are no mistakes, Alara. This is my reputation on the line." His reputation, built on her words. Alara nodded obediently. "Of course. Actually, I wanted to ask you something." Gavin sighed, annoyed. "What?" "I'd like to do one final read-through of the manuscript before we send it to print, just to check for any typos or formatting issues." "You know how I am about details." Gavin waved his hand dismissively. "Fine, whatever. Just don't change anything important. Sienna and I approved the story already." "I wouldn't dream of it," Alara said sweetly. "I just want everything to be perfect for you." That was the moment Gavin made his fatal mistake. He trusted that Alara was broken. He trusted that she would never fight back. Over the next 3 days, Alara worked like a woman possessed. During the day, she played the role of the dutiful wife. She cooked Gavin's meals. She answered his phone calls. She smiled and nodded when he practiced his author interviews in the mirror, reciting plot points he barely understood. But at night, in her attic prison, Alara became something else entirely. She opened the final chapter of The Lighthouse Secret and began to dismantle the fiction. Word by word, she replaced the novel's ending with something far more dangerous: the truth. In the original ending, the protagonist forgave her husband, and they rebuilt their life together. It was hopeful, romantic, the kind of ending that would make readers cry happy tears. Alara deleted every word of it, and then she wrote a new ending. An ending that was not fiction at all. The new final chapter began like this: "This is not the end of a story. This is a confession. My name is Gavin Ashford, and I am a fraud. The book you are holding was not written by me. Every word, every character, every emotion was created by my wife, Alara Ashford, whom I have imprisoned, abused, and planned to institutionalize so that I could steal her life's work without consequence." Alara wrote for 12 hours straight, documenting everything, every conversation, every threat, every moment of manipulation. She included dates, specific details about Gavin's meetings with Sienna, the name of the psychiatric facility he had researched, even copies of the emails he had sent to his lawyer about handling the Alara problem. She wrote about how he locked her in the attic during important business calls so she wouldn't embarrass him, how he told publishers and agents that she was mentally unstable and prone to delusions, how he had been systematically destroying her credibility for months, building a case to have her committed. And then, in the final paragraphs, she wrote the most devastating lines of all. "If you are reading this, it means I succeeded in my plan to destroy myself publicly. It means I was too arrogant to read my own book before standing in front of the world. And it means that Alara, the woman I tried to erase, has won. She always was the better writer." She always was the stronger person. And now, everyone knows. When Alara finished, she saved the document with the exact same file name as the original. Same formatting, same font, same page count. To anyone glancing at it, it would look identical. But the content was a bomb waiting to explode. The next step was the most dangerous part of her plan. Alara needed to make sure this version went to the printer instead of the original. But Gavin's laptop had all the publishing passwords and printer contacts. So she waited. 2 nights before the deadline, Gavin went out to a party with Sienna. Important networking. he called it. Alara knew they would be gone for hours, drinking champagne and celebrating a success that hadn't happened yet. As soon as his car left the driveway, Alara ran to his office. His laptop was password protected, but Alara had watched him type it 100 times. He always used the same password for everything. Gavin 2024. His ego made him predictable. She logged in and found the email chain with the printing company. Her heart pounded as she attached the new file, the one with her rewritten ending. But she was smart. She didn't delete the original email. Instead, she sent a follow-up message from Gavin's account. Please disregard the previous file. Attached is the final version with critical corrections. Use this file for printing. No exceptions. Gavin Ashford. Then she deleted the sent message from his sent folder so he would never see it. The trap was set. But Alara wasn't done. She needed insurance. She needed to make sure that even if someone at the printing company questioned the last-minute change, they would follow through. So she did something brilliant. She called the printing company herself, using a voice modulation app on her phone to sound like Sienna, the literary agent. Hello, this is Sienna Rothwell calling on behalf of Gavin Ashford. I'm just confirming you received the updated manuscript file. We made some crucial changes to the ending that are absolutely essential for the book's success. The printer's representative sounded confused. We did receive a new file late last night, yes, but it's unusual to make changes this close to the print date. Alara, as fake Sienna, used her coldest, most authoritative voice. The changes were non-negotiable. Mr. Ashford is a perfectionist, and this is a multi-million-dollar project. If there's any issue with accommodating his artistic vision, I'm sure we can find another printer who values his business. The representative backed down immediately. No, of course not. We'll use the updated file. Absolutely. Excellent. And please do not contact Mr. Ashford about this. He's in creative seclusion before the book launch and cannot be disturbed. All communication should go through me. She gave them a fake email address she had created just for this purpose. When she hung up, Alara sat in Gavin's office chair and laughed. Not a happy laugh. A laugh that came from a place of darkness and power she didn't know she had. Gavin came home drunk at 3 a.m. He stumbled past the office, never noticing anything was different. 3 days later, the books arrived. 5,000 copies of The Lighthouse Secret by Gavin Ashford. The publisher sent 10 advance copies to their house. Gavin was ecstatic. He held the book like it was a newborn child, admiring the cover, his name printed in bold letters. Look at this, Alara. Look at what we created. What we created. As if he had done anything except steal and lie. Gavin flipped through the pages casually, admiring the typography, the chapter headings. But he never read the actual words. He never got to the ending. I can't wait to read this to crowds of people, he said, his eyes gleaming with narcissistic joy. Alara smiled. I can't wait either. That night, Sienna came over with champagne and contracts. The book tour was scheduled. 15 cities. Major talk shows. A primetime television special where Gavin would read the final chapter live to millions of viewers. Alara served them drinks and appetizers while they celebrated in the living room. To Gavin Ashford, Sienna said, raising her glass. The next literary sensation. They drank, they laughed. They made plans to spend the money that hadn't even arrived yet, and in the kitchen, Alara washed their dishes with a smile that could cut glass. The book launched 2 weeks later. The reviews were extraordinary. Critics called it a masterpiece of psychological fiction. Readers devoured it. Within a month, it was #1 on every bestseller list. Gavin was invited to every major literary event in the country. He gave interviews where he talked about his creative process and his inspiration. He memorized summaries written by interns at the publishing house because he still hadn't actually read the book. Alara watched it all from the shadows. She went to some of his book signings, disguised in sunglasses and a hat, just to watch him lie to people's faces. At one event, a reader asked him, Mr. Ashford, the protagonist's inner conflict is so vivid. How did you access that emotional depth? Gavin answered smoothly. I believe true artists must be willing to explore their own darkness. I spent months in isolation, really digging into my psyche. Isolation. He meant the isolation he had forced Alara into. She wanted to scream, but she didn't, because she knew what was coming. The National Literary Awards were in 3 months. Gavin's book was nominated for Book of the Year, and the tradition was that the winning author would read the final passage of their work live on stage. Gavin was predicted to win, and when he did, he would stand in front of the world and read the ending Alara had written, the ending that would destroy him. All she had to do was wait. But waiting was harder than she expected, because Gavin's cruelty didn't stop just because he was famous now. If anything, it got worse. He started bringing Sienna home openly. They would have wine in the living room while Alara was upstairs. Sometimes she heard them laughing about her. One night, she heard Sienna say, "When are you actually going to get rid of her, Gavin? She's like a ghost in this house." "Soon?" Gavin replied. "My lawyer says after the award ceremony, we'll have enough documentation of her instability to proceed. She barely leaves the house anymore. She barely speaks. It'll be easy to convince people she needs help." They were planning her erasure as casually as planning a vacation. But Alara wasn't the ghost in this house. She was the author. And she had already written their ending. The book tour was a parade of lies, and Alara had a front row seat to watch her own life being stolen in real time. Gavin traveled to 15 cities in 6 weeks: New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Boston, Miami, Seattle. Every major literary hub in America wanted a piece of the brilliant new voice in fiction, and Alara went with him. Not because Gavin wanted her there, he would have preferred to leave her locked in the attic. But the publisher insisted. "Authors with supportive spouses sell better," they told him. "It makes you relatable, trustworthy." So Alara became a prop in her own tragedy, the silent, smiling wife standing behind the man who stole everything from her. At every event, Gavin would take the stage with practiced charisma. He wore expensive suits now, his hair professionally styled, his glasses switched out for designer frames that cost more than Alara's entire wardrobe. The crowds adored him. In Seattle, a woman in the front row actually cried when Gavin read a passage about the protagonist's loneliness. "You captured her pain so perfectly," the woman said. "How did you know what it feels like to be invisible?" Gavin gave a modest smile, the kind he had rehearsed in the mirror 1,000 times. "I think every human being has felt invisible at some point. I just tried to honor that universal experience." Alara sat in the back of the bookstore, her fingernails digging into her palms so hard she drew blood. He was using her pain. He was selling her trauma as if it were his own profound insight into the human condition. But Alara didn't scream. She didn't cause a scene. Instead, she did something far more insidious. She started asking questions. At the New York event, during the Q&A session, Alara raised her hand. She was wearing a wig, dark brown instead of her natural black hair, and heavy makeup that made her look like a different person. Gavin didn't recognize her. "Yes, you in the back," the moderator said. Alara stood up, her voice steady. "Mr. Ashford, in Chapter 17, the protagonist mentions a specific childhood memory about a lighthouse keeper who gave her a silver compass. Can you tell us the significance of that compass? Why silver and not gold?" It was a detail Alara had spent 3 pages developing in the manuscript, a metaphor for guidance without ownership, for direction that didn't demand control. Gavin blinked. He had no idea what she was talking about. "Well, the silver represents purity, and the compass is obviously about finding your way." It was a nothing answer, a vague response that meant nothing. Some people in the audience nodded, satisfied, but others looked confused. A literary blogger in the 3rd row frowned and wrote something in his notebook. Alara sat down, satisfied. She did this at every event, different disguises, different questions, always about specific details buried deep in the book that only the real author would know. In Boston, she asked about the protagonist's mother's maiden name and why it was relevant to the plot. Gavin said it was symbolic of feminine heritage. The mother's maiden name was never mentioned in the book. In Chicago, she asked why the lighthouse had exactly 47 steps, not 50. Gavin stammered and said it was an arbitrary choice for realism. In reality, Alara had chosen 47, because that was her grandmother's age when she died, and the lighthouse represented legacy. After each event, literary forums and book club websites started filling with comments. Did anyone else notice Gavin Ashford seems really vague about his own book? He couldn't answer basic questions about character motivations. Kind of weird for an author. Maybe he's just tired from the tour. Or maybe he didn't actually write it. The doubts were planting themselves like seeds, but the tour continued, and Gavin's arrogance grew with every standing ovation. Sienna was always by his side now, no longer pretending to be just his agent. They held hands at after-parties. They shared hotel rooms. Photographers caught them kissing outside a restaurant in Miami. When Alara saw the photos online, Gavin didn't even bother denying it. "Don't be dramatic, Alara," he said coldly. "Sienna and I have a connection, a creative partnership, something you could never understand." "I understand more than you think," Alara replied quietly. He laughed at her. "What are you going to do? Leave me. Without me, you're nothing. You're a woman with no career, no money, no future. I made you relevant." Alara stared at him with eyes that had once held love, but now held only calculation. "You're right, Gavin. You made me relevant, and I'll never forget that." He thought she was being sincere. He thought he had won. But while Gavin was busy being famous, Alara was busy destroying him from the inside out. She started sending anonymous packages. The first one went to Sienna, a manila envelope with no return address, delivered to her office. Inside was a photocopy of Gavin's original notebook from 3 years ago. The notebook where he had started and abandoned 17 different novels, each one lasting no more than 30 pages before he gave up. The handwriting was unmistakably his, and it was terrible. Childish plots. Cliché dialogue. Not a single sentence that showed real talent. Sienna opened the package during a business lunch with other agents. Her face went pale as she flipped through the pages. One of her colleagues leaned over. "What's that?" "Nothing," Sienna said quickly, shoving the notebook into her bag. But her hands were shaking. The second package went to a prominent literary critic who had given The Lighthouse Secret a glowing review. Inside was a USB drive containing the original manuscript files, all of them, with metadata showing they were created on a computer registered to Alara Ashford, not Gavin. The timestamps showed the book had been written over a 3-year period. Every single session logged under Alara's user account. The critic opened the files out of curiosity. Then he opened them with concern. Then he opened them with growing horror as he realized what he was looking at. He didn't publish anything immediately. He was too smart for that. But he started making calls, quiet calls, to publishers, to other critics, to lawyers who specialized in intellectual property theft. The whispers were getting louder. Meanwhile, Gavin was oblivious. He was too busy counting his money and planning his future. He had already spent the advance on a new car, a new wardrobe, and a down payment on a penthouse apartment in Manhattan. "I'm thinking we sell the old house," he told Alara one night. "Move to the city. You can stay here if you want. I'll send you money for groceries." He was already leaving her behind, even before the commitment paperwork was filed. But Alara just smiled. "That sounds wonderful, Gavin. I hope you enjoy the penthouse." "I will," he said, missing the edge in her voice completely. 2 weeks before the National Literary Awards, Sienna started acting strange. She was paranoid, jumpy. She kept looking over her shoulder at events, as if someone was watching her. She was receiving letters now, anonymous letters with no return address. The first letter contained a single sentence. "You knew the book wasn't his." The second letter contained a photograph. It was from a security camera in the publisher's office, showing Sienna and Gavin in a private meeting room. The timestamp was from 2 years ago, before the book was even finished. But the image was zoomed in on a document on the table between them, a contract, and written in Sienna's handwriting on the margin were the words, "Make sure the wife signs an NDA. She could be a problem." Someone had been watching them for years. Someone had evidence of everything. Sienna knew exactly who that someone was. She confronted Gavin in his hotel room the night before they were supposed to fly to the awards ceremony. "She knows," Sienna hissed. "Alara knows everything. She's been sending me things, Documents, photos. She's building a case. Gavin laughed, pouring himself whiskey. Alara? She's a mouse. She won't do anything. She's not a mouse, you idiot. She's been playing us this entire time. Then we'll move up the timeline, Gavin said coldly. After I win the award tomorrow night, we'll have her committed immediately. I'll call my lawyer. We'll say she had a breakdown, that she's been stalking us, that she's mentally unfit. Sienna paced the room, her composure cracking. What if she goes public before we can stop her? With what proof? It's her word against mine, and I'm the famous author. I'm the one with the platform, the credibility, the fans. Nobody will believe an unstable housewife over me. But even as he said it, Gavin felt a small flutter of doubt in his chest, because for the first time in years, he thought about the book itself, the actual words, and he realized something terrifying. He had never read the ending, not once. He had been too lazy, too confident, too busy celebrating to actually read the final chapter of his own supposed masterpiece. Sienna, he said slowly, you read the whole book, right? Before we went to print. Sienna froze. I skimmed it. You said it was good. But you read the ending? Silence. Sienna, did you read the ending? Her voice was barely a whisper. I assumed you had. For the first time, real fear entered Gavin's eyes. He grabbed his copy of the book from his suitcase and flipped to the last chapter. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second, then the third. The color drained from his face. No, he whispered. No, no, no. What? Sienna grabbed the book from him. What is it? She read the opening lines of the final chapter. This is not the end of a story. This is a confession. My name is Gavin Ashford, and I am a fraud. Sienna's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the hotel bed, the book trembling in her hands. She changed it, Sienna said in horror. She changed the ending. Oh, God. She changed the entire ending. Gavin was hyperventilating. How many copies are out there? How many books were printed? 50,000 in the first run. Another 100,000 after it hit the bestseller list. 150,000 copies. 150,000 confessions. We have to stop the ceremony, Gavin said frantically. We have to cancel. We have to... Cancel? Sienna's voice was sharp with panic. Do you know what that would look like? The scandal alone would destroy you. And if we try to recall the books now, it'll just make people want to read them more. We're trapped. Gavin grabbed his phone. I'll call the publisher. I'll tell them there was a printing error, that the wrong file was sent. And then what? They'll investigate. They'll find the original files that were created on Alara's computer, with her login, her timestamps. Gavin, if we draw attention to this now, it all falls apart. They sat in silence, the reality of their situation sinking in like poison. Maybe, Gavin said desperately, maybe nobody will notice. The book's been out for months. If the ending was really that bad, someone would have said something by now. Sienna shook her head slowly. Nobody notices because nobody reads the endings anymore. People skim. They read reviews. They see the book on bestseller lists and assume it's good. But tomorrow night I have to read it, out loud, in front of everyone. In front of the world, Sienna corrected. It's being broadcast live. 50 million viewers. Gavin felt like he was drowning. I could refuse, he said weakly. I could say I'm sick, that I lost my voice, and look like a coward. Gavin, you're nominated for Book of the Year. If you don't show up, your career is over anyway. My career is over either way, he screamed. Sienna stood up, her face hard. Then you'd better practice reading that confession, because in 24 hours, everyone is going to know what we did. She walked to the door. Where are you going? Gavin asked desperately. She looked back at him with something between pity and contempt. To call my lawyer. You should probably call yours too. The door closed behind her. Gavin sat alone in the hotel room, holding the book that was supposed to be his triumph. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold it. And somewhere in the city, in a small apartment she had rented with money saved from years of secret work. Alara Ashford was getting ready for the award ceremony. She had bought a beautiful dress, black, elegant, the kind of dress that commanded attention. Because tomorrow night, she would no longer be invisible. Tomorrow night, the world would finally see her, and they would see exactly what she was capable of. The grand auditorium was a cathedral of ambition, 3,000 seats filled with publishers, agents, authors, critics, and celebrities. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling painted with classical murals of muses inspiring artists. Cameras positioned at every angle for the live broadcast that would reach 50 million viewers across the world. This was the night where literary legends were made or destroyed. Gavin Ashford sat in the third row, his tuxedo perfect, his hair styled flawlessly, but his face was the color of old paper. Sweat beaded at his temples despite the air conditioning. His hands gripped the armrests of his seat so tightly his knuckles were white. Sienna sat beside him, her expression frozen in a mask of composure, but her eyes darted constantly toward the exits, calculating escape routes. Behind them, scattered throughout the audience, were the people who had received Alara's anonymous packages, the literary critic who now knew about the metadata, the blogger who had started connecting the dots about Gavin's vague answers, a publishing intern who had found discrepancies in the original manuscript submissions. They were all watching, waiting. And in the front row, in a seat she had purchased herself, sat Alara Ashford. She wore a black evening gown that hugged her figure with elegant simplicity. Her dark hair was styled in soft waves. She wore minimal makeup, but her eyes were lined with a sharpness that made her look like a different person from the mousy wife who used to hide in attics. She looked like an author. Gavin hadn't seen her yet. He was too focused on his own panic, clutching his copy of The Lighthouse Secret like it was a live grenade. The ceremony began with speeches from industry leaders, presentations of smaller awards, Best Debut Novel, Best Young Adult Fiction, Best Poetry Collection. Each winner gave tearful thank you speeches, holding their trophies like sacred objects. Gavin couldn't hear any of it. His heart was pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. Finally, the host took the microphone. She was a famous actress who loved books, her smile radiant under the stage lights. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, the National Literary Award for Book of the Year. The audience leaned forward. This year's nominees represent the finest in contemporary fiction, stories that have moved us, challenged us, and reminded us why we love to read. She read through the list of 5 nominees. Gavin's name was last. And the winner is... She opened the envelope with theatrical slowness. The Lighthouse Secret by Gavin Ashford. The audience erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. People stood for a standing ovation. Gavin felt like he was walking to his own execution as he stood up and made his way to the stage. His legs were mechanical. His smile was painted on. Sienna gave him a look that said, "Don't you dare fall apart." But her own face was rigid with fear. Gavin climbed the steps to the stage. The host handed him a crystal trophy shaped like an open book. It was heavy in his hands, too heavy. "Congratulations, Gavin," she said warmly. "The tradition of this ceremony is for the winning author to read the final passage of their book to our audience. Are you ready?" No, he was not ready. He would never be ready. But he nodded. The actress gestured to an ornate podium set up at center stage. Behind it, a massive screen lit up, ready to display the pages as he read them for the television audience. Gavin walked to the podium. 3,000 people watched him in person. 50 million watched him through cameras. He opened the book to the final chapter. His hands were shaking so badly the pages rattled. He cleared his throat. The microphone amplified the sound through the auditorium. "Thank you," he began, his voice cracking slightly. "This book means everything to me, and I'm honored to share the ending with all of you tonight." He looked down at the first line of the final chapter. His vision blurred. He blinked hard, trying to focus. He could do this. He could just not read it. He could improvise. He could say he was too emotional. He could. But the screen behind him was already displaying the page. The words were projected 15 feet tall for everyone to see. There was no escape. Gavin began to read, his voice hollow. This is not the end of a story. A confused murmur rippled through the audience. This wasn't the tone they expected from a literary novel. Gavin continued, each word feeling like swallowing glass. This is a confession. My name is Gavin Ashford, and I am a fraud. The murmuring got louder. People looked at each other, confused. Was this part of the book? Some kind of metafictional twist? The book you are holding was not written by me. Every word, every character, every emotion was created by my wife, Alara Ashford. Gavin's voice was shaking now. Sweat poured down his face. For 3 years, she wrote in isolation while I took credit for her genius. I locked her away. I silenced her. I threatened to have her institutionalized so I could steal her work without consequence. The auditorium had gone completely silent. The kind of silence that precedes an explosion. I am standing here tonight, holding a trophy I did not earn, reading words I did not write, because I am a coward and a thief. Someone in the audience gasped. Gavin tried to stop reading. He looked up at the crowd, his face a mask of horror, but the screen behind him continued to scroll. The words kept appearing, and the television cameras were broadcasting every second to the world. A producer in the back of the auditorium gestured frantically at the camera operators. Cut away, but they didn't cut away, because 50 million people were watching this train wreck in real time, and cutting away now would only confirm the catastrophe. Gavin's lips moved mechanically, reading against his will, as if some force outside himself was compelling him to continue. I conspired with my literary agent, Sienna Rothwell, to erase my wife's identity. We planned to have her committed to a psychiatric facility. We documented false evidence of mental instability. We were going to make her disappear. Cameras swung to Sienna in the audience. Her face was frozen in absolute terror. She tried to stand up, to leave, but the crowd had packed in so tightly she was trapped in her seat. Gavin kept reading, his voice breaking. The woman I tried to destroy is stronger than I ever understood. She is smarter. She is more talented. She is everything I pretended to be. And then, from the front row, Alara stood up. The cameras found her immediately. She didn't rush the stage. She didn't shout. She simply stood there, letting everyone see her. Gavin looked down from the podium. Their eyes met, and in that moment, he understood the full scope of her revenge. She had let him have everything, the fame, the money, the adoration. She had let him climb as high as he could possibly climb, so that when she pushed him, the fall would destroy him completely. Alara walked calmly toward the stage. The audience parted for her like she was royalty. A security guard moved to stop her, but the host waved him away. Because everyone in that auditorium now understood what was happening. This wasn't a disruption. This was justice. Alara climbed the steps to the stage. She walked across to Gavin, who stood frozen at the podium. She gently took the microphone from his hand. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong, the voice of someone who had been silent for too long and would never be silent again. Good evening. My name is Alara Ashford, and I am the author of The Lighthouse Secret. The auditorium erupted, not with applause, with chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed like lightning. People stood up in their seats, trying to see better. The host tried to restore order, but it was impossible. This was the biggest scandal in literary history, unfolding live on television. Alara continued speaking, her voice cutting through the noise. For 10 years, I was told I wasn't enough. I wasn't pretty enough, wasn't confident enough, wasn't marketable enough. I was told that my words needed a different face to matter. She turned to look at Gavin, who stood beside her, utterly broken. So I let him have his face. I let him have his moment. And I rewrote the ending. She held up her own copy of the book, one she had kept from the very first printing. Every copy of this book contains the truth. 150,000 confessions, sitting on bookshelves around the world, waiting for someone to read them. A literary critic in the audience stood up. I read it. I read the ending. I have the metadata proving she wrote it. Another voice from the back. I have emails. Sienna Rothwell knew about the fraud. The intern stood up, waving documents. The original submissions have Alara's digital signature. It was an avalanche. All the seeds Alara had planted over months were sprouting simultaneously. Sienna tried to run. She actually made it to the aisle before two people Alara had never seen before blocked her path. Sienna Rothwell, one of them said, flashing a badge. They were police officers, detectives from the fraud division. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and attempted unlawful confinement. Sienna's face went white. This is insane. You can't. But they were already putting her in handcuffs. On stage, Gavin fell to his knees. Literally dropped to his knees on live television, the trophy falling from his hands and clattering across the stage floor. "I'm sorry," he whispered, but the microphone picked it up, broadcasting his pathetic apology to 50 million people. "I'm so sorry." Alara looked down at him, not with hatred, not with triumph, with pity. "You're not sorry you did it, Gavin. You're sorry you got caught." She bent down and picked up the trophy. The crystal book gleamed in her hands. "This belongs to the real author." She walked to the edge of the stage, where cameras captured every moment. To everyone watching, I want you to know something. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about truth. How many other voices have been silenced? How many other stories have been stolen? How many other people were told they weren't enough? Her voice rose, powerful and clear. "I am enough. My words are enough. And I will never let anyone take them from me again." The auditorium exploded with applause. Real applause this time. Not for a fraud, but for a survivor. Security finally escorted Gavin off the stage. He walked with his head down, his career obliterated, his name now synonymous with literary theft. Sienna was led out in handcuffs, photographers capturing every humiliating moment, and Alara stood alone on the stage, holding the trophy, bathed in light. The host approached her carefully, as if approaching something sacred. "Ms. Ashford," she said softly, "would you like to read something? Your own words?" Alara smiled. A real smile. The first genuine smile she had felt in years. "Actually, I'd like to read the ending I originally wrote, before I replaced it. The ending that should have been." She pulled out a worn manuscript from her purse, the original final chapter. The one about forgiveness and hope and rebuilding. And as she read, her voice filled the auditorium with the beauty that Gavin had tried to claim as his own. By the time she finished, half the audience was crying. Not because the story was sad, but because it was so achingly beautiful, and they had almost lost it to a thief's vanity. 3 months after the ceremony, the world looked very different. Gavin Ashford's name had become a cautionary tale, a punchline, a warning to anyone who thought they could steal someone else's work and get away with it. The lawsuits came fast and brutal. The publishing house sued him for breach of contract and fraud. They demanded the return of his entire advance, plus damages. $2 million he no longer had because he had spent it all on cars and penthouses and designer clothes. The penthouse was seized. The car was repossessed. His bank accounts were frozen. But the legal consequences were nothing compared to the public destruction. Every talk show he had appeared on issued statements apologizing for promoting a fraud. Every bookstore that had hosted him removed his promotional materials and burned them in symbolic ceremonies that went viral on social media. Book clubs across the world held special meetings where they ripped out the title page with his name and replaced it with handwritten notes that said, "Written by Alara Ashford." Gavin tried to give interviews, to explain himself, to beg for forgiveness, but nobody wanted to hear from him. Every network, every podcast, every platform rejected him. He ended up back in the small apartment he had lived in before the book was published. Alone, broke, a ghost of the man who had once held a trophy on national television. One afternoon, he sat in that apartment, scrolling through his phone, reading the endless articles about his downfall. Gavin Ashford, the face of literary theft. How one man's arrogance led to the greatest fraud in publishing history. Alara Ashford rises. The real author gets her justice. He threw his phone across the room. In a moment of desperate delusion, he tried to write something new. Something to prove he had talent, that he could create on his own. He sat at his laptop for 6 hours. He wrote 3 sentences. They were terrible. He deleted them and never tried again. Sienna Rothwell's fate was even worse. She was convicted of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted false imprisonment. The evidence Alara had collected over months, the documents, the emails, the recorded conversations, all of it came out during the trial. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in federal prison and ordered her to pay $200,000 in restitution to Alara. Her literary agency collapsed within weeks. Every client left. Her professional reputation was incinerated. On the day she was led away to begin her sentence, photographers captured her face. She looked 10 years older than she had at the awards ceremony, hollow, defeated. She never worked in publishing again. But while Gavin and Sienna's worlds crumbled, Alara's world was being rebuilt from the ground up. The publishing house acted quickly. Within a week of the awards ceremony scandal, they announced a special re-release of The Lighthouse Secret. The new cover was elegant and simple. Alara's name in bold letters. Her photo on the back, not hiding anymore, but standing proudly as the author she had always been. The book's description was rewritten to tell the real story. Not just the fiction inside, but the truth of how it was created. Written in isolation by a woman who refused to let her voice be silenced. This is the novel that exposed one of literature's greatest frauds. This is Alara Ashford's masterpiece. The re-release sold 300,000 copies in the first week, 3 times more than the original fraudulent version had sold in its entire first month. Readers wanted to support her. They wanted to be part of her vindication. Book clubs organized events celebrating her courage. Libraries created displays honoring her work. The literary world rallied around her in a way they never had for Gavin. Because her story wasn't just about a good book, it was about justice. About a woman who had been invisible finally being seen. Alara was invited to every major literary festival in the world. She said yes to all of them. Her first event was in New York, at the same bookstore where Gavin had once held court, pretending to be a genius. The line to see her wrapped around the block. When Alara took the stage, the applause was deafening. She stood there for a moment, letting it wash over her, feeling the validation she had been denied for so long. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for believing me." A woman in the front row raised her hand. "Ms. Ashford, do you regret not speaking up sooner? Do you wish you had exposed him before the book was published?" Alara thought about that carefully. "No," she said finally, "because if I had tried to stop him before the book was released, it would have been my word against his. He had the charisma, the confidence, the connections. I had nothing but the truth, and the truth, by itself, is often not enough." She paused, looking out at the hundreds of faces watching her. "But I let him build his empire on lies. I let him get everything he wanted. And then, when he was at his highest point, when he thought he was untouchable, I pulled the foundation out from under him. The truth became undeniable, and he fell so far there was no climbing back." The audience was silent, absorbing the calculated brilliance of her revenge. "That's why I rewrote the ending," Alara continued. "Not just to expose him, but to do it in a way he could never escape. Every book, every copy, every reader who gets to the final chapter will know what he did. His fraud is immortalized in the very work he tried to steal. That's a justice that lasts forever." The applause this time was not just appreciation, it was awe. Over the following months, Alara's life transformed completely. She signed a 3-book deal with a different publishing house, one that valued authors and protected their rights. The advance was substantial, enough to buy a beautiful house with a writing studio that had huge windows and natural light. No more attics, no more hiding. She hired a personal assistant, a lawyer, a publicist who actually worked for her interests. She started a foundation called the Invisible Authors Project to help writers who had been exploited, silenced, or had their work stolen. She used part of her book earnings to fund legal aid for authors fighting plagiarism cases. Within a year, the foundation had helped 23 writers reclaim their stolen work. Alara also started teaching. She gave workshops on writing, on finding your voice, on protecting your creative rights. At one workshop, a young woman raised her hand nervously. "Ms. Ashford, what if people tell you that you're not good enough, that you don't have what it takes?" Alara smiled, the kind of smile that held years of pain and triumph. Then you write anyway. You write because the story demands to be told, not because someone gave you permission. You write because your voice matters, even if the world hasn't figured that out yet. And you protect your work like it's your child because it is. Never, ever let anyone convince you that someone else could tell your story better than you can. The young woman nodded, tears in her eyes. 1 year after the awards ceremony, Alara was invited back, not as a guest, not as a scandal, as a nominee. Her second novel, The Woman Who Rewrote the Ending, was nominated for Book of the Year. It was a fictionalized version of her own story, the tale of a writer who takes back her power from those who tried to destroy her. Critics called it a masterpiece of resilience. Readers called it the most important book of the decade. On the night of the ceremony, Alara walked into the grand auditorium wearing a dress the color of victory, deep crimson, bold, unafraid. She sat in the same front row seat she had occupied the year before, but this time she wasn't hiding. This time, everyone knew her name. When they announced the nominees for Book of the Year, her name rang through the auditorium with respect. And when they opened the envelope and read the winner, Alara wasn't surprised. The Woman Who Rewrote the Ending by Alara Ashford. She walked to the stage with her head high. No trembling hands this time, no fear, just power. She accepted the trophy, the same crystal book that Gavin had dropped on this very stage a year ago. She held it up to the light, letting it sparkle. "This trophy means everything to me," she said into the microphone. "Not because it validates my work, but because it represents every person who was told they weren't enough, every voice that was silenced, every story that was stolen." She looked directly into the camera, speaking to millions of people watching at home. To anyone out there who is invisible right now, who is being told their words don't matter, who is watching someone else take credit for their brilliance, I want you to know something. Her voice was strong, unshakable. You are enough. Your story is enough. And one day, the world will see you the way you deserve to be seen. Don't give up. Don't stay silent. Keep writing. Keep creating. Keep fighting for your truth. She held the trophy close to her heart. Because in the end, the real authors always win. The auditorium erupted in a standing ovation that lasted 5 full minutes. And as Alara stood on that stage, bathed in light, holding her trophy, she thought about the woman she used to be. The woman who hid in attics and believed she was invisible. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger. Someone who had taken the worst betrayal of her life and turned it into the greatest victory. Gavin had tried to steal her story, but he forgot one crucial thing. She was the author, and authors always get to write the ending. If this story of revenge and justice moved you, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that their voice matters, because everyone deserves to tell their own story. Remember, this video features a fictional narrative crafted with AI tools for storytelling and entertainment. Not based on real news or specific individuals, but the message is real. Never let anyone steal your light. Never let anyone silence your voice. And never, ever forget that you are the author of your own life. Write your ending. Make it unforgettable.